Good morning, and welcome to the 2021 ASFPM Conference and the AECOM Showcase. This year's AECOM Showcase is titled Building and Strengthening CTP Capabilities, Envisioning the Next 20 Years. During this year's showcase, AECOM is going to put a spotlight on the handful of amazing cooperating technical partners, better known as CTPs, that we are working with. Each of the CTPs that AECOM will be showcasing today has their own unique story to tell, as they all have started on the ground floor and have since become a driving force within the National Flood Insurance Program. To tell you a little bit about myself, my name is David Rubenstein, and I will be the moderator for this year's AECOM Showcase. I have worked for AECOM, as well as dedicated my over 19-year career to working with the National Flood Insurance Program, mainly through production, outreach, and disaster assistance. In my current role, I serve as the Compass JV National Production Manager, as well as the AECOM CTP lead for the Flood Risk Solutions Department. The Flood Risk Solutions Department is dedicated to the success of the CTPs by providing a consistent level of production, quality, and risk management to our clients. The team that I will be introducing to you today, including myself, have over 100 years of combined experience working with an NFIP. AECOM as a company is excited to work with FEMA as they cultivate new CTP partnerships from across the nation. The pursuit of state, regional, and local partnerships by FEMA is evident by the multiple training and outreach activity FEMA hosts throughout the year, as well as in this year's ASFPM conference. There was a boot camp that was held yesterday. There is a session E4 that will be held on Wednesday afternoon, and Thursday's plenary session. All of them are centered around the CTPs. It is clear that FEMA is taking a giant leap to fulfill their CTP vision and mission statement of empower the communities to take action to reduce risk based on informed, multi-hazard-based data and resources. AECOM is pleased to be actively working with many of these CTPs to increase the awareness of flood risk to their communities by performing 1D and 2D BLE modeling, traditional H&H modeling, firm production, outreach, development of interactive websites, and disaster assistance. Presenting in the showcase today are a few of my colleagues who are leaders in their field. Daryl Fontenot will be presenting on the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources CTP, better known as SCDNR. Daryl will focus on SCDNR's vision and sustained leadership that has shaped the CTP over the last few decades. Daryl will highlight how SCDNR has embraced a partnership of sharing data with other state agencies to reduce the risk of flooding to the residents of South Carolina. Jane Thompson will be presenting on a very interesting CTP that AECOM is working with, as the Swanee River Management District is neither a state, county, or city CTP. Jane's presentation will focus on the challenges of managing flood risk in this unique area of North Central Florida, while also planning for future economic growth. Dan Curley will be presenting on the Iowa DNR CTP and how they are using digital flood risk data and updated mapping based on LIDAR to all the communities in the state. The Iowa CTP has embraced the use of technology and innovation to reduce the risk of flooding to the residents of Iowa due to a catastrophic flood event that happened to their state a little over a decade ago. Rigel Rucker will be presenting on the Colorado Water Conservation Board CTP. The CWCB's mission is to conserve, develop, protect, and manage Colorado's water for present and future generations. CWCB has completed the entire risk map lifecycle, has embraced the use of data to reduce the risk of flooding to the residents of Colorado, as flooding is the most common and widespread of all natural hazards in the state. Last, but certainly not least, John Dorman will be providing a thoughtful presentation on the future of disaster flooding. Please note that there will be a Q&A period at the end of the presentations. However, feel free to submit your questions in Slido as the showcase continues. Without further delay, Daryl, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Again, as David said, my name is Daryl Fontenot. I'm a project manager at AECOM, also a PE and a CFM. I've been with AECOM for 17 years. I've got 22 years of experience in the FE program, over 30 years of engineering experience. I've been with AECOM for those 17 years and worked with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, CTP, for those 17 years. I've managed 27 countywide studies and 8 watershed studies as part of the South Carolina CTP program. So I'll be highlighting that program for you today. Again, I want to introduce you to the CTP Program Manager of DNR, Maria Cox-Lamb. She will give you an overview, past, present, and future of the South Carolina CTP program and its accomplishments. And by the way, we want to reach out to Maria. She's just been recognized by FEMA's Federal Insurance and Mitigation Administration as the winner of the 2020 NFIP State Coordinator of the Year. So congratulations, Maria. After this video, we'll get into more details concerning the CTP's accomplishments and future endeavors.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Cox-Lamb, and I am the CTP Program Manager along with the State Coordinator for the Flood Mitigation Program in South Carolina. Since the beginning of the South Carolina CTP program, we have emphasized protecting lives and property. Over the years, we have provided additional data under our CTP program, integrated substantial damage assessment field data, and assisted in disaster operations. We have achieved this through providing our communities model-backed A zones. This also included a training on how to pull the BFEs from the models. We have provided firms that included parcels and building footprints where they were available. We've calibrated and evaluated our regulatory and non-regulatory products by using the data collected during our post-disaster substantial damage assessment work. So we've been able to use that elevation data that we collect in the field to actually augment and make our regulatory and non-regulatory products better. Also, we are using our extensive knowledge in regards to floodplain mapping, how water moves, all of that information to provide inundation maps for large scale disaster events. What started as a request to assist SCDNR law enforcement division with search and rescue has developed into being used by many state agencies and local governments to assist in disaster preparations, search and rescue, and evacuations. That's just to name a few. So the future of the South Carolina CTP program is 2D and a website we're building called the South Carolina Flood Impact website. We feel 2D mapping provides valuable information that when appropriate training is provided to local communities, it will benefit in relaying and identifying true flood risk. So we're working to convert our A zones to AE zones using 2D. The South Carolina Flood Impact website is a tool we're developing that will provide regulatory and non-regulatory information with the ability to download modeling data. It will also house our inundation mapping and will update based on prediction updates and actual event parameters. This will be used to expand our existing assistance for disaster operations, including but not limited to staging of valuable resources, search and rescue, and evacuations.
All right, thank you, Maria, for the overview of the CTP program. Now into the details of the program's accomplishments and future. And by the numbers, the DNR became a CTP in September of 1999. There are 2 contractors currently working and assisting DNR. AECOM has been doing that since 2003. There have been 30 mapping activity statements that have been received by DNR, and over $47 million for the funding has been received to date. Again, continuing into the accomplishment numbers, map mod studies completed 46. That is all counties in South Carolina have a map mod study completed for them. We have on the way 15 risk map watershed studies. 7 of them have been effective. 1 is preliminary, 7 are in data development. We have done some risk map conversion for 17 counties. We've also done 7 watershed flood risk projects as well. We've leveraged FEMA funding to acquire LIDAR for all 46 counties in the state. And we've also completed a LAMP project around the Congaree River levee area in the city of Columbia, the state capital. Now, just getting a little more deeper into the numbers. Again, we want to look at the how we've assisted DNR. We've completed 13,000 miles of H&H analysis, 1D, 11,000 square miles of 2D modeling. Primarily, this has been for the inundation mapping and modeling. There are 7,000 square miles of special flood hazard area has been mapped. Over 4,500 firm panels have been updated. 62 flood insurance reports have been updated, and over 150 outreach meetings have been held through the history of this program. Now, South Carolina being a coastal state, we don't want to forget about the coast. There's 300 miles of coastal shoreline that has been updated. We updated the storm surge using the ATCIRC and SWAN coupled model. We also updated the overland modeling mapping using WAFAs. And we've also on those coastal firm maps have put the Limois line too as well. Now getting to the next part of the program that the CTP has got into is disaster assistance. As you can see here, we leverage study data for disaster response and recovery. You can see here, these are the major events that we've assisted DNR in, but some are small events that happen as well, similar to the 2020 tornado or the spring flood and the winter floods in 2021. Also, even sunny day flooding, it happens in coastal areas. But you can see here, the primary things we've assisted DNR in for these disasters has been stream gauge monitoring and analysis and inundation modeling and mapping, and anything we could do to assist law enforcement or state agencies get people out of the way and protect them. Now moving on to the future. What does DNR have to the future as they continue to develop? First thing is the South Carolina Flood Impact Site, inundation and mapping for action, as Maria mentioned in her video. Again, it's an easy access for flood information, be a flood warning system, real-time mapping, state-of-the-art tools, integrating riverine and coastal hazards. The goal is to implement a statewide seamless system. Right now, we're using HMGB grant money as a pilot study as we're piloting one watershed riverine and one county coastal. We've also received additional funding for two watersheds from the South Carolina Department of Transportation grant that we're working on. And just to give you an idea of what the front page of this website is going to look like, this is it, and hopefully it will be going live in the next month or so. Now getting into some additional future things. Basically, DNR has received a special project funding from FEMA for the piloting the heat maps. They're basically going to use a special flood hazard area developed as part of the FIS. We want to provide a more visual that does not have defined lines. This indicates that the risk reaches beyond the lines depicted on the firm. So this will be a GIS-based tool for outreach so people can better understand their true flood risk. Next project we have that's been funded, a special project funding, is the watershed portal story maps. They will be developed for watershed studies. They will assist in engaging stakeholders and strengthening local and relationships and increase risk awareness. They will keep locals up to date with the study that's in process and also empower local officials by providing tools and resources to assist in their decision-making for it. And we're looking forward to getting this implemented in South Carolina. And really the future is also to keep going beyond traditional flood maps, changing the message from in or out to low, moderate, and high flood risk. We want to create flood risk products that assist in relaying true flood risk. Now, this is a lot that's been accomplished by DNR, but it hasn't been done by itself. There's a partnership between DNR and FEMA, but there are also additional partners that have helped in the success of this CTP. There's a South Carolina LIDAR Consortium, which basically leveraged FEMA funding to acquire LIDAR data for the state. There's the South Carolina Department of Transportation, where the DNR has received a research grant for the South Carolina Flood Impact website. DNR provides modeling data for the DOT Scour project. Then there's the South Carolina Office of Resilience. There's a cooperative agreement for the use of existing and new TD modeling. AECOM recently completed a comprehensive watershed study for the South Carolina Office of Resilience. And what we did was we leveraged the existing 2D modeling that we did for DNR, and then DNR in turn will be able to leverage the 2D modeling that we created for the Office of Resilience. So they can basically provide her more data for the inundation mapping process and other flood risk data for South Carolina. DNR was also made a part of the project review committee that went through the process of developing that flood mitigation plan. Also, DNR submitted 2 planning projects for CDB mitigation funding. Now, the big thing always been not much to get done without very successful if you don't have adequate funding. So here are the current funding sources that DNR has. There's the FEMA flood risk map funding is primarily the major one. There's the HMB grant that DNR has now. There's the DOT research grant. There will be CDB mitigation funding through the South Carolina Office of Resilience. And they've been feverishly working on establishing a dedicated state funding source, and hopefully getting closer to that. Now, just to kind of wrap it up to the end, look at the long-term program goals. And this is the purpose of the CTP, is to protect lives and property. We want to make sure we assist in disaster operations. We want 2D mapping for true risk, flood risk identification, converting all A zones to A zones, as Maria mentioned in her her video. And then there's a South Carolina impact site, which will have regulatory and non-regulatory flood data access, downloadable hydraulic modeling data from any map mod study forward, and then inundation mapping and data for large-scale flooding events. Now I've got basically 3 points I want to make as we come to a close here. The first point is, here's the contact information for DNR and for AECOM. If you're interested in knowing anything about CTP or joining CTP, give us a call and we can be glad to assist you in that. Second point is, AECOM is committed to the success of the South Carolina CTP program. We've received recognitions, as you can see, for outstanding service to DNR for the 2015 flood, the Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Florence events. These awards were greatly appreciated, and we believe they are representative of AECOM's commitment to the success of DNR. The last point I want to make is a great relationship has been developed over the history of our service to DNR, and we will continue to develop this relationship into the future. AECOM looks forward to the opportunity to use our CTP experience and expertise to build other great relationships with other communities that want to become CTPs. That's it for the South Carolina highlight. Thank you. Now on to the next CTP to be highlighted. It will be the Swanee River Water Management District in Florida. Jane, take it away.
Thank you, Daryl. Good morning. My name is Jane Thompson. I am a Florida Water Resources GIS Manager with AECOM, and I'm joining you today from the Sunshine State. This morning, I would like to showcase one of our CTPs, the Swanee River Water Management District. AECOM has been working with the Swanee River Water Management District for almost 20 years. Personally, I performed my first flood insurance study with AECOM for the Swanee River in 2005 and had the great privilege of studying the entire district. Our work with the district led me to join the FFMA as well as ASFPM. I earned my CFM in 2009 and have dedicated my entire professional life to making Floridians aware of their true risk when it comes to flooding. Here in Florida, our water management districts are so diverse that in 1972, the Florida legislature established 5 water management districts that 4 years later were empowered by the electorate to assess ad valorem taxes to fund the management of the state's water and related land resources to benefit the citizens and the environment. The 5 water management districts are Northwest, Swanee River, St. Johns River, Southwest Florida, and South Florida. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has oversight with the 5 districts, each of which has unique characteristics that require unique solutions to problems within each of the focus areas. The Florida Division of Emergency Management has the responsibility of administering the National Flood Insurance Program for the state and works hand in hand with all stakeholders attending in-person and virtual public meetings. During FEMA's MapMod program, 3 water management districts opted to cooperate with the FEMA in the CTP program: Northwest Florida, Swanee River, and Southwest Florida. AECOM supported all 3 districts. Each district had different needs at that time. For instance, with USGS topo as the best available, Swanee River decided not to redelineate, but apply the vertical datum conversion and update cross-sections and BFEs. Southwest Florida had detailed watershed studies and mapped them to the 10th of a foot, showing basins, nodes, and links from the models. Northwest Florida studied specific streams in detail using HEC-RAS and performed redelineation of all studies based on best available topo, and were the first in Florida to study the coastal floodplain in detail. During FEMA's Risk Map program, Northwest and Swanee River were the only 2 districts that chose to remain in the CTP program. While Southwest Florida opted out, they continue to study their watersheds at a detailed level and submit those studies in collaboration with the counties through the MT2 process. AECOM continues to support the Southwest Florida Water Management District through their watershed management program. The Swanee River Water Management District encompasses a unique area comprised of working and natural forests, farms, rivers, springs, and estuaries. Agriculture, silviculture, aquaculture, and springs-based tourism are major economic drivers in the region. Protecting water resources not only supports natural systems, but also is necessary for future economic growth. The Swanee River Water Management District services 7,640 square miles, 15 counties, 13 river basins, and has 200 miles of the historic Swanee River, spanning from the Georgia border to the Gulf of Mexico. The district shares 5 counties with 3 of its sister water management districts. Jefferson is shared with Northwest Florida, Levy is shared with Swiftmud, and Baker, Putnam, and Alachua are shared with the St. Johns River Water Management District. All of the districts collaborate to edge match GIS and modeling information and ensure accurate and continuous coverage of the state. And AECOM has facilitated that cooperation since 2004. Leroy Marshall is the district's chief professional engineer. He began working with the Water Management District in 1995 as a water resources engineer focused on environmental resources permitting. He is responsible for managing the FEMA Risk Map program and serves as the district's dam specialist. Many of you know Leroy as he's an active member of the FFMA and recently rejoined the board for another term. Due to the rural nature of the Swanee River Water Management District, communication and outreach are paramount. In the early 2000s, data storage was not what it is today, so the data would reside at the district or on an AECOM server. So the district decided to purchase and distribute PCs loaded with the DFIRM database, DFIRMs, FIS, and SOMA reports, provided ArcView licenses and printers to serve 35 counties and municipalities. The district's goal was, and still is, to provide science-based solutions and leverage partnerships and data to provide information in a way that is understood and utilized by the public. So for the Swanee River Water Management District, the most valuable thing that came from map modernization was the digital uplift. Harnessing the GIS with the countywide DFIRMs and databases was a game changer. They created the Swanee River Water Management District Flood Mapper, which is still the go-to for property flood searches. The district developed FEMA Risk Map project dashboards for each watershed and posts them online where you can view the report. What is outstanding to see from this dashboard is that for the 200-mile Swanee River, there were just 21 severe repetitive loss properties, even with 34 presidential disasters declared. Yeah. Swanee River has completed the study of all of the watersheds in the district under Risk Map and are now leveraging that data to build upon the watershed approach. The acquisition of district-wide LiDAR has meant that every watershed can be studied with more detailed information. The recently adopted minimum flows and levels will be leveraged in the study of the Swanee River watersheds, which are AECOM's current watershed studies for this district. AECOM's primary focus with this study is to create one continuous HEC-RAS model for the 200-mile Swanee River, with an emphasis on correcting historic errors in the 3 existing models for the 2 basins. AECOM will produce regulatory, non-regulatory, and enhanced products, as well as additional outreach in which the lower and upper Swanee River watershed meetings will be treated as one and will be co-funded and target for the same day to reach as many residents as possible. As part of the watershed studies, AECOM will prepare for and assist the district with additional public outreach prior to preliminary issuance, and assist the Swanee River with TV, radio, and social media blasts. Additionally, the Swanee River is performing a pilot project to explore holding the resilience meeting that occurs at the end of the project on the same day as the discovery meeting in order to leverage the attendance and empower the stakeholders to be proactive and participate in planning and mitigation and flood protection in the new upcoming study. When you think about how far the Swanee River Water Management District has come from 0 digital products in 2004 to the development of graduated flood risk products in 2020, it's hard to fathom how far technology will take them and AECOM. Here are some current and future potential projects for the Swanee River Water Management District. The district acts as a grants hub for the communities with its river and springs grants, and looks forward to housing a model repository and become the region's technology hub for water quality and quantity data. The Florida Department of Health is leveraging the district's FEMA flood hazard data by using the 10% and the 50% annual chance events to permit and regulate septic tanks within the district. And this feature could become a very powerful tool in Florida for our fight for clean water. Let's hear from the district now in their own words.
I live in this area because there's no other place like it. I grew up in Live Oak, Florida, and have many memories of visiting our world-renowned springs, hiking through the woods, and kayaking the historical rivers. Now I have the opportunity to help protect these springs and rivers while working at the Swanee River Water Management District. It is my responsibility at the district to inform and educate residents, visitors, and our future generations about our water resources and what they can do to help. The district is one of 5 water management districts within Florida that preserves and protects our water resources. We serve a 15-county area and work closely with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to implement water quality and conservation projects, establish minimum flows and minimum water levels, and collect data. Accurate data is critical to our scientific process in protecting our water resources. Science and data collection are the foundations of the work we do. Our district staff uses data to monitor water quality, manage resources, identify key areas for projects, and plan for future water use. All aspects of the work we do tie together for the protection of our water resources for nature and people. The district plans for future water use to ensure water is available for future generations. Planning takes into account increased populations and projected residential, agricultural, and business water use. To protect water resources, we also protect the nearby habitats and ecosystems through the establishment of minimum flows and minimum water levels, or MFLs. MFLs guide our resource management program and permitting process. Resource management helps to ensure sustainable economic development while protecting our resources and residents. We work with the community to issue permits for a variety of projects such as irrigation management, construction along the river, protection of wetlands, and more. To help allow for growth, district staff work closely with local governments and partners to identify projects that address water resource needs in the community. These projects help protect against flooding, safeguard water quality, conserve water, and expand water supplies. All of these programs work together to serve you and protect our resources. No other state compares to the resources we have in Florida. And no other area in Florida compares to Swanee Valley. The springs, rivers, lakes, they are all breathtakingly beautiful and are critical to Florida's ecosystem and economy. We all enjoy these resources, and we all have a role to protect them for future generations. Learn more on what you can do to protect our rivers and springs and the North Florida way of life by visiting our website at myswaneeriver.com.
And what a way of life it is. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story about the Swanee River Water Management District. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can find them at the myswaneeriver.com. If you want to learn more about becoming a CTP, just give me a call. One shout out to the Florida Floodplain Managers who will be hosting ASFPM 2022 next year in Orlando. We hope to see you all there. And now I'll pass it on over to Dan on the Iowa DNR.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Dan Curley. I serve as one of the project managers for AECOM in supporting the Iowa DNR CTP, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about the Iowa DNR. A little bit more about myself. I've been with AECOM since 2005, where I began as a GIS specialist, working on FEMA floodplain mapping and various flood studies. And I've been doing that type of work ever since, pretty much. So I've been managing specifically the Iowa DNR CTP task orders for AECOM since 2017. And again, I'm just excited to be here to highlight the great work that Iowa is doing and has done over the many years, and how we at AECOM do our best to support that program. We'll start with the summer of 2008 when devastating floods hit most of the state of Iowa. This photo on the right here shows the city of Cedar Rapids. This is kind of a famous photo. It's a devastating photo, but it does show the tremendous scale of the flood and the devastation. So it's a great reminder. The map on the left here shows the blue counties that were included in the disaster declaration in 2008. So that's 83 of the 99 counties in the state. So pretty much imagine the entire state is underwater, or the vast majority of the state. And to make matters worse for the state of Iowa, nearly a third of their counties had no flood maps. And about half of the counties that did have flood maps were referencing old engineering models that were 20 to 30 years old. So as you can imagine, that was a big eye opener for the state of Iowa. In 2009, they were awarded a $15 million grant from the federal government, and the Iowa DNR became the FEMA CTP in 2009. So they initially dived in with that grant money and immediately started updating the flood maps statewide, and creating new flood maps where needed. So since then, the Iowa CTP has been dedicated to providing digital flood risk data for the entire state, updated on brand new LiDAR, and providing that information to all the communities in the state, statewide. In addition to those 2008 floods, the statewide LiDAR program was critical in kickstarting the Iowa CTP. Iowa had actually already begun collecting statewide LiDAR in 2007 prior to the floods. So that was kind of an advantage for them there, and definitely acted as a springboard to the success of the floodplain mapping program. In 2010, the DNR partnered up with the Iowa Flood Center and the University of Iowa, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and other contractors, to start producing a statewide seamless coverage of one-dimensional model-backed base-level engineering data for the entire state. So basically, their goal was to have a model for every single stream in the state that drained at least 1 square mile of drainage area. So basically to update all of the Zone A streams throughout the entire state, as well as to redelineate as many of the Zone AE enhanced stream reaches as possible, and starting with those 85 disaster declared counties was critical. So about 5 to 6 years later, in 2015, 2016, the DNR completed that goal. They modeled the entire state of Iowa, and they made that data available to their communities through the use of the iowafloodmaps.org website that you see on screen there in the lower right. So providing that data to their communities, and also beginning that process of updating their flood insurance rate maps statewide was critical in 2015. So next, I'd like to share a short video provided by Scott Ralston, who is the Iowa DNR CTP Program Manager.
It's an exciting time for Iowa and for the floodplain mapping profession. Iowa's statewide floodplain mapping program began over 10 years ago following the devastating 2008 floods. Now, with annual funding from FEMA through a Cooperating Technical Partnership, or CTP, the DNR is embarking on the next iteration of floodplain mapping. The DNR's two-dimensional base-level engineering statewide floodplain mapping program. As Iowa DNR's CTP program manager, I would like to comment on AECOM's involvement in our floodplain mapping program. AECOM has been working for the DNR floodplain management section since late 2011. So AECOM has worked consistently for the DNR and has done a very good job. They also did some 2D BLE work in Dickinson County in the Great Lakes area up by Okoboji. And that work actually was issued as revised preliminary maps and is being incorporated into their regulatory products. So we appreciate AECOM's consistent, high quality work for the DNR.
So the amount of work that the CTP has accomplished in the last decade is just amazing. Just within the last 7 to 8 years or so, over 50 countywide studies have gone from draft through regulatory effective map adoption. And to me, that's staggering. Just to think about the amount of community outreach that took place over that time period is tremendous. Over 300 community meetings reaching over 3,000 attendees. And AECOM has been pleased to support the DNR along with their other contractors with data development, due process management, and outreach. For their work, the DNR's accomplishments even earned them a CTP Recognition Award in 2019 for excellence in outreach and communication. As Scott had mentioned, we at AECOM completed a pilot study for 2D BLE modeling just last year. The purpose of this project was to provide some communities in Dickinson County with some additional data to support their regulatory products that were in prelim development. So the purpose of the pilot study was to assess 2D BLE as an approach, as a way to map disconnected low-lying localized flooding in certain areas. The communities had noted that the one-dimensional statewide mapping that the DNR had completed was great, but it was missing some of these low-lying areas and some water bodies, some ponding, some localized flooding that often occurs. So we thought that 2D BLE might be a good option to test out in this area. And it turns out it was a tremendously successful way of providing model-backed identification of all potential areas of flood risk within this project area. So AECOM and the Iowa DNR held coordination meetings with the communities and provided the models and the mapping to them for use in their local floodplain management. The communities were so pleased with the results of the study that they have decided to actually incorporate that flooding on their flood maps. And that brings us to where we're moving currently as we speak within the state of Iowa. This year, the state is beginning a new project to develop two-dimensional base level engineering statewide. So this initiative will use today's latest innovations, today's latest technologies to build an even stronger foundation of statewide floodplain mapping for the state of Iowa. AECOM is super excited to work with the Iowa DNR to support this 2D BLE modeling out effort, to support them in outreach and the creation of flood risk products. And we're just really looking forward to kicking off this next phase of statewide mapping. And I mentioned the statewide mapping as a foundation, and I think that's an important point. If you're thinking of becoming a CTP, it's something to think about. Starting with a strong foundation is critical. For Iowa, first it was the statewide one-dimensional base level engineering, and now they are moving forward and building on that foundation with 2D BLE. So it's no doubt the Iowa DNR is positioning themselves to become a leader in utilizing future innovations in flood risk data sets. The data from 2D BLE, for example, can be enhanced and built on to create probabilistic flood risk analysis to generate flood hazard and flood risk data that can be aggregated down to the structure level and to the neighborhood level. That data can aid in local planning and cost benefit analysis for mitigation projects and flood protection measures. High resolution damage curves can also be used in communities to show hotspots throughout the community where they might be able to, just by increasing development standards slightly in some areas, they might be able to show tremendous reduction in losses due to flooding. So communities such as Cedar Rapids, which were the hardest hit by the 2008 floods and are still actively working to improve their flood control systems, those communities can use the data such as the graduated flood risk, the full risk profiles. So not just the riverine flooding, but also the pluvial localized flooding, the residual risk that might exist behind levees and other flood control structures. And of course, the site-specific, building-specific risk information that I'm sure every homeowner is looking for. So the Iowa DNR is continuing to be proactive and will be proactive in riding the wave of big data and better technology and continuing to strengthen their foundation of statewide floodplain mapping. And AECOM is just excited to support them in producing better tools, better data that their communities can use to reduce risk over the years and to become more resilient for a long time to come. So in closing, thank you for your time again. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to myself at AECOM or Scott Ralston with the Iowa CTP. We'd be happy to talk to you about the work that Iowa is doing and how AECOM supports that program. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to our next speaker, Rigel Rucker out in Colorado.
All right, so now what you've all been waiting for is to hear about Colorado, correct? My name is Rigel Rucker. I am a Water Resources Program Manager. I have been working on H&H type work for over 18 years. That includes flood risk analysis, drainage design, levee certification, flood mitigation, etc. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the CWC efforts that we support. So a little bit about CWCB. A lot of you may remember Twee Patton, who was the one pushing CWCB efforts for a while. Terry Fade is now taking that over, and she is leading the charge for what we're about to talk about, which is looking at the state of Colorado. As you can see on the left, there's a lot going on. So she's got a lot on her plate. But she's got a lot of support. We're supporting her with a couple other consultants, and we all try to work together as one team, moving it all forward, trying to do the best we can for the state. All right, so I'm gonna kind of walk you through this program and how it's come to be. So the Colorado CTP program probably started out like any other program where there was a lot of flood studies that needed to be done, a lot of work that needed to be updated in the state. But around 2013, you can see on the right here, there was some pretty historic flooding. There were floods anywhere from 10-year events to over 100-year events. So a lot happened at that time. There was a lot of damage. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. The state of Colorado basically secured a lot of state funding. One, to go in and repair a lot of this damage, but also look at stream mitigation type work. The other thing that they did was to get going on updating the risk, flood risk in a lot of areas where it was shown that it was either out of date or it changed significantly based on those floods. So during those efforts, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of parts moving. There were people doing emergency repairs. There were people doing, there was lots of different work happening. There was lots of emergency analyses happening. And so while we took on the effort of going through and determining the updated risk for all these areas, there were a lot of stakeholders that we had to coordinate with. So there were, I believe, over 70 different communities that we had to work with. There were different consultants. There were different efforts. There was a lot of moving parts. So one of the big focuses we had to look at was outreach. We had to look at how could we really spell it out to these different communities of what was happening, how could we make sure that we weren't stepping on each other's toes, how could we share data as it was being developed. And so we ended up developing a lot of information like you see here, really spelling out the process, asking key questions at the beginning and through the process, et cetera. The other thing was making sure we got easy access to this information. So if you look on the right, one of the things we thought about immediately was homeowners. Once we started developing information, how could they get access to this information? So we developed a site where they could basically plug in an address and get basic information on their home. But we also did that on a county basis for everyone else. The reason for all this was we recognized that all this data being developed, one, we didn't want people to need advanced knowledge to be able to utilize it and access it. We wanted it to be easy to use, easy to access. But we also wanted it to serve as a record for everyone to understand what was being produced. And so in addition to some of this information, we also put together trainings and other homeowner tools to help them understand what was being developed. Now, if you look on the screen here, this is coloradohazardmapping.com for each of the studies that was conducted and is still being conducted, which I'll talk about in a minute. Developed a story map type site on a county basis, which can basically walk anyone through, one, what studies are being conducted, but what are the results? What is the changes since last firm information, depth. We're utilizing depth grids so that people can click and see what the depths are at calculated locations. Same with water surface elevations, zone A's, AEs, et cetera. Instead of having to go to a typical FIS report and try to determine what a water surface elevation is, they can come straight here on a website, click and get it pretty quickly. So a lot of good information that is easily accessed by everyone. So as I mentioned, a lot of that was created specifically for a post-disaster type scenario so that a lot of information could be shared. However, it helped build the framework for the bigger effort, which is now being pushed forward. But we all worked with CWCB to kind of look at, all right, well, we understood that hazards were a problem, or not a problem, but out of date up in the northeast area where all this flooding occurred. But it's a big state and there's a lot of area and there's a lot of information that either it might be out of date or it might just need some additional information. And in some cases, it might not even be digital at this point. So we worked to look at a 5-year plan for the state. And in doing so, we looked at other things beyond just flood risk, but looked at, some of the metrics FEMA uses, such as what is the end view for the different streams along the state, and where is their LiDAR available? Now, the state of Colorado has been really good with partnering with other agencies to secure LiDAR across the state, which is still ongoing, and we had to kind of think about that as we prioritized. So we looked at what you see here, which is a kind of 5-basin setup so that you could do a rolling check through the state every 5 years to see where information was out of date. But in order to do that, we needed to first update the information. So the first piece was to take any place where there was LiDAR and start generating large-scale 2D models so that we could have a baseline or a H&H information available throughout the entire state. Once we started that, you can see here on the right, we started with discovery, which a lot of people know and understand. But we did it a little different. We wanted to put together something that communities could continue to use and would make sense to them. So instead of putting together a discovery report, we put together a discovery plan set. And if you look over here on the right, you can see it basically this follows kind of your plan set format, where we presented the information mostly graphical with a little bit of explanation on the left. But we looked at things like, all right, not only where is flooding out of date, but you can see here, we also looked at their hazard mitigation plans. Fire is a big thing in Colorado in the forested areas. What are some of the other hazards that we could look at while we're touching this? And we came up with a ranking system of, all right, where should we look at these types of studies? And then we also looked at, all right, what are the big issues in each county or community that we may need to look at beyond flooding, so that we're not just with blinders on doing 2D models and putting out flood information based on that, but seeing what are the other factors that could be impacting their issues. What are the other factors to look at as we go through this process? So we wanted to put this in this format again, so it could be reused, and it was easily understandable. And so far the response has been pretty good on this. So as we're going through that, you can see here on the right, this is just one of the things we've put together through this process as we're going through these, which is, this is an all hazard map. One of the communities we worked with was really interested. They said, yeah, we like you looking at all these hazards, but we want to see it all in one place. And they actually had 1970s maps that were all hazard maps, and we made them digital form. So we looked at landslides, floods, avalanche, and wildfire, and gave them a composite risk. And then, like everything else we've been doing, we've been making it digital so they can easily get to it, access it, use it pretty quickly. Another thing we did in the same county, they recently had a big mine spill. And when that mine spill occurred, they didn't know how long it would take for it to get down to further into other communities. So we put together a calculator where they could look at, all right, if it's flooding at a specific level and some type of, it doesn't have to be a mine spill, but some type of contributor happens, how long does it take to get down to another area? And then another thing, and I'm just giving some examples here, is, you know, there's a lot of LiDAR being flown in the state. And when new LiDAR is flown, there is a process for using LiDAR for LOMAs. And so we came up with a process to use any LiDAR flight to look at that on a mass scale, take your full LiDAR set and look at where are LOMAs applicable within that footprint all at once. And we put a how-to together for that, both in paper and a recording so that people could see it. But we've done other stuff, as you can see on the left, through that process, given different support. One other one I like to note is one you see down at the bottom left of the screen, which is snow melt. We had record snowpack that same year, and the community was interested in how they would know when to have to close roads and what roads they'd have to close. So we were able to forecast how much snowpack would come down or would melt, and when and what event that would be, so they would know which roads to close. And to even cap that off, there was a burn scar in that watershed, so we had to see what the impact of that was. So a lot of cool stuff that we're doing on top of just looking at the flood risk. The state is continuing to also move forward with more than just looking at analysis, but they're kind of taking ownership of the LOMAR review cycle. And one thing we were able to help them with is generate not only the plan for that, but again, with the website that we have, we were able to put together a website documenting what the process is for that. And also some of the checklists and things that they're able to use for that program. So basically, we were able to work with them to help get that program up and running as well. So all that information being developed, you know, the state looking at all this flood risk. It's not like we finish it and we're done. What are the next steps? So there's a couple tools that we've helped develop to help them look at the future. One is what you're seeing here on the right, which is looking at some of the different factors that impact why maybe a flood study might be needed. One is CNMS, number of stream miles, population, etc. Well, we've made a rankable web tool for CWCB to look at that information and see where the issues might be. Not only that, but the rankings may change. So you can go into each different piece and change the ranking in each of those. So you give more weight, say, to flood insurance rate maps at a date or something like that. But then if they're interested in seeing what factors are really affecting a county and why it's showing up as a high level, they can go into each one and get a little report of what those factors are for each. The other thing with the kind of future using this information, so again, a lot of 2D information happening. CDOT within the state is also doing a lot with 2D. A lot of other federal agencies are starting to do a lot with 2D. We're working with a group. So a bunch of us formed a group in Colorado called the Colorado 2D Consortium. And we use that to look at what types of studies are happening, what information is being developed, and how could we use that to really make sure people are informed and able to use that data. So far, we've looked at 2D floodways and given FEMA recommendations on how we think 2D floodways would need to be developed, managed, et cetera. And then we've gone all the way to the point of developing trainings on that information for local stakeholders. We've also given recommendations on, similar to what you've seen, using a lot of digital information. But we're still continuing. And one of the things we're looking at coming up, I should mention, we also did a rain on mesh recommendation. But the next step is likely to look at large scale data, how to work with it internally and externally, how to disperse that information, how to get it out for use, and how to use it for small studies types of things. So a lot of work still yet to come, a lot of recommendations still to come out of that group. And as we're working on those, the next steps for a lot of these, say, counties and areas that now have a lot of good 2D information, have a lot of other information, is continuing to focus more on those other risks, how they impact, what their impact is to flooding, what are some potential mitigation efforts, looking more at like planning type information for those different counties and communities, and how they can use all this information and how we can get them to that next stage of being more resilient. So I know you're all sad that we only had a little bit of time to talk about Colorado, but if you want any more information on any of this or what we're doing, any of the tools we're developing, et cetera, my contact information is here. You can also contact Terry, and both of our contact information is ready to go. So that's all I have. I will now hand it over to the next presenter, and he can finish us off.
Well, thank you, Rigel. That's some great progress that you guys have made. Good morning. I'm John Dorman. I'm the Vice President, Global Disaster Resilient Solutions Leader at AECOM. And I first want to thank each one of you for the tireless and many times thankless work that you do to enable a long-standing and resilient society from flooding. Being in your role and in the past, I certainly understand that. And AECOM, we recognize that there's always going to be hazards, but there doesn't have to be disasters, and you guys really play a part in that. So thank you for what you do. Just a little bit about myself. Prior to coming to AECOM about a year ago, I served as the Assistant State EM Director for Risk Management in North Carolina, and was the founding director of the North Carolina Flood Risk Management Program from 2000 to 2018. So it's great to be back with y'all. At AECOM, I really work to enable and empower clients such as yourselves, communities, states to establish really a framework and a plan that will enable you to do flood identification, risk assessment, effective mitigation, and effective integration into what are the next steps, which for me is emergency management and into that arena. So I'd like to spend a couple minutes, if I can, to talk with you about what is your perspective on the past, the present, and the future, because we have a certain number of waves coming towards the program and they're on the horizon. So I want to talk about Charles Dickens for a minute. I know many of you are saying, what is he talking about? But Charles Dickens is really an interesting person that comes to mind. I've been reading the books of Charles Dickens with my kids, and so I've been reading them as well. Charles Dickens, I don't believe, was an official CTP. But I will say that as a 19th century English author who wrote many journals and novels, he certainly got a number of books and quotes that came to mind as I thought about the journey that I've taken, that we've all taken in the future for flood hazard risk management. Looking at the first book is really a tale of two cities. This book truly provides all of our perspectives through the opening line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. For a number of us looking at the national map, it's been the worst of times. Flooding is in the #1 hazard in the United States and globally. Over 44% globally of the disasters that occur are occurring through flooding. As you can see on this map, that flooding is prevalent across the United States. In the US, there has been a perpetual increase in flood losses since 1980s, from $4 billion in the 80s to $17 billion from 2010 to 2018. You know, NOAA also reports that in 2020, there were 22 separate billion-dollar weather disasters. Many of these were flood, causing $95 billion in damage. And that's just the billion-dollar disasters. 2020 also saw a record-breaking 30 named tropical storms, of which 12 of them were landfalling. So unfortunately, it is not if, but when we're going to experience one of these events that causes or fosters the worst of times. However, let me move from that, because it has also been the best of times. As you can see from the speakers, that many of the states and communities, counties have gained experience and taken on new roles and capabilities, even to progressing to becoming CTPs, which I believe are at the highest numbers at this point in time. Since becoming a CTP in North Carolina over 20 years ago, there have been a tremendous number of advances. Looking at this cross-section slide that was generated from LIDAR, advances in ground accuracy through LIDAR technology has progressed stream and ground geometry and elevations further than it's ever gone before. We've gone from 30-meter DIMs back in the early 2000s to a 10-meter DIM, to a 4-meter DIM. We're now at a 2 points per square meter with great accuracy, and even on the horizon, there's certainly 8 points and 30 points per square meter. So an amazing, amazing set of data that we can have. That information leads us to this next slide, which shows the buildings and shaded relief. Advances in geometrics and data manipulation has enabled time and cost-efficient asset identification and impact assessment. And that is truly important. It's not just about showing where the flooding is, it's what's going to actually occur. So data, geomatics, data analytics have all allowed us to do that. Looking at this next slide, it really also shows the advances with hydrologic and hydraulic modeling advances. Looking back at 2000, we were dealing with 1D approximates. Then we moved to 1D limited detail studies with base flood elevations. We're now at the point of 2D modeling, and the ability to provide probabilistic flood risk analysis. All of that really gives us a much greater accuracy and precision than we've ever had before. Looking at this next slide really starts talking about what are some of those advances that we have through this. We have the ability to show, and you can see on the top side is actual flooding, and you can see the arrows where we have several buildings and points on the ground, and the one below that is actually the modeling, and how the modeling and the real-time comparison are spot on. That's just amazing. The identification of effective projects for mitigation is also another one on that next slide. And then finally, one that is of greatest benefit is dealing with emergency management and the ability to show real-time flood mapping. And on the next slide, you can see here, this is really the identification of different buildings, moving past, as Rigel was talking about, moving past just flood mapping and flood identification to all hazards mapping. This next slide, as I was mentioning, also speaks to really what excites me the most, and that is taking flood hazard and flood risk information and integrating that into real-time response as well as preparedness. This is where we as floodplain managers can really start saving lives. And I think there's great value to that. And it's great to see, I think, as Daryl showed in South Carolina, they're progressing forward with this as well. So, you know, that's one perspective Charles Dickens provided, but I think another great one is that in the book of Great Expectations, it really starts speaking of a coming of age. And looking at the program across the nation, it is at the point, I believe, to move further into other influences that the flood mapping can do. As you've heard, there's a national mapping program funding. That funding at the present time is at its peak over the last 20 years. These funds enable CTPs to grow. It also enables those communities that want to dip their toe into taking on CTP delegation. However, there's a number of new significant drivers and waves that are on the horizon that can be a great opportunity for CTPs and the nation. The Biden administration has placed focus and funding on implementing preeminent risk reduction and resilience from future climate-induced flooding. This is a dramatic change, and I believe this is a great opportunity that we should each take a hold of. Also, the administration and Congress, through the 2017 Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, significantly increased the available funding from year to year for FEMA's BRIC program, the Build Resilient Infrastructure and Community Program. So large funding allocations are on the horizon that will enable us to do much more mitigation and resilience. And then finally, as many of you have heard, Congress is currently working through a climate resilient infrastructure bill. This bill, looking at approximately $2 trillion, allocates funds to upgrade and build new clean infrastructure, as well as structures that can be climate and storm resilient. So I would just say it is clear that the flood hazard risk management programs across the country will be a critical component to implementing these drivers that are waves in our near future. Finally, Charles Dickens provides another quote out of Tale of Two Cities, and this really to me is a charge to myself and to you as floodplain managers. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. Many of us will be traveling to the coast. You can see this next graphic kind of tells us that as we travel to the coast, we'll have small and big waves. However, each of us may have a different perspective on that. Some of us may see the wave and have no equipment, no training, and we'll see that as an ominous, somewhat unusable item that we should avoid. Others of us who may be in the surfing realm, who have good training, good equipment, well, we'll see this as the way that we need to travel and take ourselves farther than we can before. So it's important to note that waves will always be on our horizon, waves that are good opportunities, and then also waves of peril. As you can see on that previous graphic, that communities that utilize the opportunities that come about before and after disasters will certainly reduce the loss of avoidance in the future. So as we move forward, there are some threads that I just want to close on. One, there is a wave of needs that's coming about for flood modeling, risk assessment, and effective mitigation. There's also a wave of opportunity to go farther than your program has gone before, funding and other opportunities. And that could be starting as a new CTP if you're thinking about that, as well as expanding into other areas of great value. Your perspective on the waves is heavily influenced by your experience and current capabilities. But I just say with great hope and excitement that there are great tools out there now, great technology and great peers that you just heard who have ridden those waves and are certainly able to help you ride those waves to success. And finally, I would just say AECOM is also excited. We want to ride those waves with you. We've been riding waves with many of these communities, and we look forward to doing that with you. So I would just close and say, enjoy your summer, enjoy the conference, and let us know how we can help. Okay, David, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, John. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the CTPs that allowed us to put a spotlight on what they're working on. You can see that all of them have really started at the ground level and through the collection of data and advances of technology, as well as having an advocate at that CTP, has really advanced the status of where they are at in the National Flood Insurance Program. Myself, having dedicated my last 19-year career working with the National Flood Insurance Program, I've been able to see multiple disaster assistance assignments, as well as many public outreach meetings. And I'm able to relate with many of the concerns the communities have regarding the management of flood risk. But I'm very optimistic on the future of the NFIP and the partnerships I'm seeing coming out of this program. With advancements in technology, the NFIP is in a better position more than ever before to create and disseminate data, as well as provide outreach and training opportunities. This means as a nation, we'll be better prepared when the next wave comes ashore. Take a moment and think for yourself. Is your community better prepared tomorrow than they are today? If you're ready to take that first step in becoming a CTP or want to learn more about what AECOM can do for your community, feel free to email any of the folks that spoke today, or even feel free to give me a call. I cannot wait to connect. Please sit tight, as there might be a slight delay in opening the floor for questions. Thank you.
So, Dave, we have a couple of questions.
Great. Yep, I am seeing them now. I guess the first question, and maybe we send this one to John Dorman, as I think this might fit well for him, but what is the greatest challenge for the CTPs AECOM is supporting?
Well, I think the greatest challenge, not just for the ones that AECOM is supporting, but I think all CTPs, and that is putting together a plan. You need to have an understanding of where you want to be, where you're heading, and how to get there, and putting it into a process that gives you an understanding of how to fund it, how to work efficiently through that. And AECOM has the great capability to carry and put together a plan for you. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is first getting that plan in place. And I think once you have that, then you've got a target and direction how to do it.
Great. Thank you, John. Daryl, I actually have one for you. SCDNR has been working post-disaster relief. It seems like almost every year there's a hurricane or a major flood event that strikes South Carolina, and it tends to be around Maria Cox's birthday. If everyone is looking to send her a present, that's when they tend to hit. But what do you see as the program manager for SCDNR that AECOM contributes the most disaster relief? One of the things that I was impressed I heard from Maria is based on the depth and analysis grids that emergency personnel are able to put emergency response vehicles and life-saving equipment in certain areas based on the depth and the velocity grids. But what do you see as the program manager for SCDNR as the greatest contribution that AECOM has to SCDNR?
I think the greatest contribution we can make is our technical expertise to the ideas that DNR wants to accomplish. We were able to take the inundation modeling, the 2D, and apply that to what they wanted to do as far as getting law enforcement information, as far as where people were going to be in danger at, where they could post equipment at to rescue people, to try to give them warning so they wouldn't have to be in a rescue operation all the time. So our technical expertise, the development of the 2D modeling that we've been able to use has been greatly. And then I think we have a great working relationship. So we're able to kind of work and bounce things off of one another and come up with the right plan to move forward.
Great, thank you, Daryl. The next question I have under Slido, and I'll direct this one at John Dorman as well. Just maybe you can bring some historic information working with the North Carolina CTP, but how are the CTPs funded?
Well, most CTPs are funded through FEMA, which is a great opportunity. Many times states are having difficulty, or communities are having difficulty pulling funds together, at least initially. And I think setting up as a CTP and putting that request into FEMA will certainly get one of the supporting firms such as AECOM to help them through that. Once you're able to start putting a program together, there's great opportunity in financial partnerships. And North Carolina at the time was able to actually partner with other agencies on similar value data. We actually drew in a little over $200 million towards that. So there's always an opportunity to partner with others, and we can certainly help with that.
Great. Thank you, John. Jane, I didn't see any more questions in the Slido, but I have a question for Dan Curley, unless there's another one that I'm not aware of. Okay.
Nope, that's it, David.
Great. So Dan, little information about the Iowa CTP that I'm hoping you can maybe tell a little bit to the audience is Iowa kind of was triggered from a catastrophic flood. And I still think it's hard to fathom, over 90% of the state having flooding issues. But they've really embraced technology and kind of rapidly increased from where they were, a little over a decade ago now. And you talked a little bit about the future, but what's the kind of community outreach and the aspect that Iowa DNR has that kind of takes that next step? Are they, they have the website, but what else are they doing to kind of display this information, disseminate it to all the residents of the state of Iowa?
Sure. Yes, the Iowa CTP does have their website that they have set up through the Iowa Flood Center, the iowafloodmaps.org, which is an online data map viewer for viewing the ongoing projects, the models, the mapping. So they're able to see that information live and share that and disseminate that information with their citizens. With the next phase of 2D BLE, that process is happening right now. It's just now kicking off, but I do know in Iowa's vision, in their methodology, they're planning to ramp up another online viewer to share the 2D BLE products and those data sets, and also host quite a lot of another round of outreach meetings, public meetings, to talk about BLE, to educate the public, and to really work with and coordinate with the public on the incoming data, the new data.
Great, thank you, Dan. one of the topics that I'm really interested in is climate change. And Rigel, I'm hoping maybe you can provide a little bit more information on what the Colorado CTP is doing.
Sure. So as a CTP, we're still in the early stages of discussion on that. But the state of Colorado has been really interested in climate change, been coming up with some information related to that. So what our plan is to start looking at that at Discovery. There's a lot of good climate change tools. And I know in our company, we have a lot of good climate experts. And what the plan is what we'd look at is potentially what could the impacts of climate change be on, say, precipitation, and kind of like if you're mapping the 1% plus or minus on a 1% flood, you could also look at what are the pluses and minuses from climate change, and how could that impact different communities.
Great, thank you, Rigel. And then Jane, last but not least, to follow up on the Swanee River, what are you guys doing? I know there's a lot of economic growth, very large agriculture boom. I was just down in Florida, enjoyed the nice sunny weather, but can you give us a little bit more on the future and what's kind of sculpting the Swanee River?
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to imagine with the Swanee River Water Management District, with the population density so low, they don't necessarily have the bandwidth, literally, for each of the residents, for them to be able to get online and go to a meeting like this or a public meeting. So we have to really combine and make a real blend of grassroots movement where we are working through libraries, we'll be working through the communities that way, hopefully working through even the public schools. We want to take an approach of educating the students and scholars as they're coming up in the world. In Florida, we have Flood Awareness Week. The Florida floodplain managers celebrate every year and bring awareness to all of our communities. And that's going to be a big player in what we do in the Swanee River, is to reach as many people as we possibly can.
Great, thank you, Jane.
There was one more question, David, that came in.
Okay.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please. Yep, went over it right now.
Okay. What are some of the benefits you see when CTPs take on map maintenance, for example, LOMC's responsibilities for the program?
Yeah, I can maybe answer that, and hopefully maybe some of the other CTP leads here can jump in as well. But I think when you're the CTP, you have more of a personal approach. You know what's best for your community. You know which areas are having problems. You know from your constituents where the flooding happens, what are the flood events. And I think when the CTP takes over their flood mapping, whether, regardless whether it's outreach or the mapping, I think it has more of that personal approach. And when they see someone from example, SCDNR showing up at meeting, they know that the state cares and they are doing what they need to do to identify and share that flood risk. So that's my personal approach. I love working with the CTPs. I love the approach. I love who's the floodplain manager for this city? Oh, I worked with this person. I know this person. This is where the flooding's happening. And they have that approach. But, I don't know, do you guys have any thoughts or feelings on that? Because I see everyone nodding their head. So you must be in agreement with me, but any thoughts?
I'd say that's a big one. And the other piece I'd add is it's easier for coordination. It's easier for someone to call the local state and talk to them about, a Lomar issue than someone working on a national team. It's easier for them to know what's happening both on, say, the mapping side, if there's a statewide mapping effort, like what's happening in a lot of these now, and be able to coordinate that with, changes that are still happening on the Lomar scale. So I'd add that piece to it, though.
Great. And John, you worked with North Carolina. What did you see kind of being on that state side that you were able to provide as a benefit as the CTP to your community?
Yeah, so David, North Carolina stepped into the mapping program because FEMA, as great as FEMA is, really is a national program. It's not a state or a community program. And so, as you said, the ability to actually have a personal relationship with those folks that you're actually trying to help develop flood resilience through the mapping, So that's a big one too. And knowing me, I'm all about money. Funding certainly helps out as well. So that's always a piece there as well. But finally, who better knows what the state of future that you have for your community than the community? And you become really the captain of the ship. Working with those others, that partnership that Rigel mentioned, it's always better to be able to partner with local governments, either through data, local data, or funding, than trying to work through a federal program. So those 3 or 4 are really the big ones that started in North Carolina, and I think were very, very beneficial over the years I was there.
Great. Well, I want to thank all the leaders that have attended this showcase for AECOM. Feel free, please email us, give us a call if you have any questions. And I want to thank the floodplain administrators for the states and the CTPs themselves that allowed us. And I want to say the response was overwhelming. The amount of CTPs that wanted to highlight and showcase what they've done, and especially from where they've been to where they are now and where they're headed to the future. It's very exciting. I'm very glad that I'm 19 years in this program, and I can't wait to see what the next 20 years brings. So thank you very much. Enjoy the conference. Once again, feel free to email us with any questions or comments. Take care.